Ross Dellinger of Yahoo now did your typical, because we get a lot of this time of year, the 10 coaches on the hot seat and stuff like that. But the difference between when Ross does it and when Saturday Down South or whoever does it is Ross comes at it from a sourced perspective. I mean, we can do this again like we did a few weeks ago where we say Andy Staples is just making it up and pulling it out of his rear end and he knows nothing. And we can do that again with Ross. But now, two of the most highly respected college football reporters have said the same thing. Zach Arnett did show up in this article from Yahoo, and this is what Ross Dellinger said about it. First of all, he said his buyout is
by the way,
three.
There have been 3 hot seat articles written that have mentioned Zach Arnett.
What's the third?
Andy Staples, Adam Rittenberg from ESPN, and now Ross Dellinger from Yahoo Sports.
Another very highly respected college football reporter, and Adam Rittenberg.
Very much so.
Those 3 guys don't get to where they are and do what they do by making stuff up. Buyout $4.5 million. Here's the skinny, is what he says. Arnett is just 8 games into a 4-year, $12 million contract. Would they really make a move so soon? Remember that Mississippi State promoted Arnett without much of a search after the sudden passing of former head coach Mike Leach. The move was rooted in retaining current players and recruiting commitments at a time when the school did not have an athletic director. Zach Zellman came aboard a few weeks later as State's AD. The Bulldogs are 4-4, and their only SEC win is that 7-3 victory in Fayetteville. I love how he frames that 7-3 victory, because nobody could forget that there was a game that ended
unforgettable
7-3. Arnett's contract is school-friendly, giving the program the ability to wiggle free of it for 50% of the remaining pay with mitigation language, which means if he'd get another gig, his new salary would reduce the buyout. And Zach Arnett is too highly coveted as a defensive mind to not get another job right away if he wanted to. Even if he didn't, that is still a very cheap buyout without him getting another job right away.
You know, you think about buyouts, right? And you're like, wow, $4.5 million, that seems like a lot of money. And then you think, oh, Jimbo Fisher might get $75 million. $4.5 million is chump change in the buyout world these days, especially, again, if Zach Arnett were to lose his job as the head coach at Mississippi State, he would immediately become a very much in-demand defensive coordinator. And Mississippi State, their administration had the foresight to put that mitigation clause in there so that if he gets a job paying him $1 million a year, that they don't have to pay him that $1 million. So, I mean, you think about Zach Arnett, West Coast guy, right? I mean, Lincoln Riley's going to call him, isn't he? If he's available.
You would think so.
So he'll get a job. He'll get a job. And Mississippi State will be on the hook for less money.
So there's still 8 games left. He could beat Kentucky this weekend. He could beat Ole Miss and Southern Miss, and this would obviously be a conversation that is not worth your time. But when now, I thought it was just
look back on it and laugh.
When now 3 different people have reported and said what they have said, it is very clear that there is some level of merit to it, and there's probably going to be some local spin to say, no, not at all, not even thinking about it. Well, here's if I know anything about Zach Selman, he strikes me as brilliant. Now, in interviews, he's mastered the art of saying a lot with very little, but from gathering whatever I can from what people say about him and decisions he makes and stuff like that, he appears to be brilliant. And a brilliant athletic director is not doing nothing if he anticipates the possibility of making that decision. He's too smart for that. Oh, they're just going to sit on their hands and no, we'll see. There's no reason to start anything yet. Unfortunately, there is reason to at least look and have a plan if you have to make a very difficult decision. So I don't know. I mean, I guess that's splitting hairs, but the idea that Ross and Andy and Adam are just pulling this out of nowhere, and there is no line of thinking at Mississippi State at all that this is going to happen right now. Mm-hmm. There is nothing logically that tells you that is the case, frankly.
Right. Yeah. I mean, again, and I need to reiterate this for everybody, that nobody is saying that Zach Selman is calling these writers and be like, hey, you want to float this for me, I'd appreciate it.
Nope.
That's not happening. But people know people, and people know people, and people know people, and those people know things. And so maybe it's a third-party source, but there are people who know things. And so, like you mentioned, Staples, Rittenberg, and Dellinger, they didn't just wake up one morning, throw some stuff on the wall, and all of a sudden they became one of the top college football writers out there. They know how to source things, and they don't write things unless they're sourced. So you can believe what you want. This is America. It's America, Borky.
Yes, it is.
But you would be ill-advised to bet against those guys knowing what they know.
Yeah. There's some more layers to this. We'll get to those. We'll get to some of your messages when we come back. 601-879-4395, the C Spire text line. You want to be a part of the show. They're kind of filling up, so we'll get to some of yours. Joining us, Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports included Zach Arnett and a coaches on the hot seat with buyout language and stuff like that. The third such article so far this year. A bunch of your texts came in about it, so we'll get to some of those right now. First one is, the Zach Arnett hire resembles the Matt Luke hire at Ole Miss to you. In fairness to Mississippi State, there was very little they could have. I mean, that is an unprecedented spot that they were in without an athletic director. Coach tragically passes away. And you were extremely late in the cycle, too. Because there's that one person that said State should have hired Coach Prime when they had the chance. They didn't have the chance. He was already at Colorado. I mean, that's how late in the process all of this happened. I don't blame them for making the decision that they did. I could not possibly. Hindsight is 20/20 on that, man. At the time, it was, this is practical. There's no AD. It makes sense continuity-wise, stuff like that. If it doesn't work out, it doesn't work out. But this is an unprecedented situation. You can't do the hindsight and be like, well, Mark Keenum's an idiot for doing this. No, he's not. Nobody could have handled that situation, quote-unquote, well. Their coach passed away. I mean, what do you do with that? There's really nothing you can do with that. Nothing good, air quotes, anyway.
Right. The only thing you could do is throw your hands up in the air and say, look, in this day and age of the transfer portal, this class isn't that big a deal. And you just tell those kids, like, we're going to figure it out, but you have to sign, and you may, if you don't like the next coach, you can transfer. But and if you do, we'll just have to hit the transfer portal really hard. But at the moment in time that this happened, I felt like this was the right decision. I still, in hindsight, knowing what I know now, still say at that moment in time that was the right decision.
Now that we know what the contract says, especially.
Right.
I mean, yeah. Matt Luke got a fully guaranteed contract without a mitigation clause. He got to go to Georgia and make $1 million a year as the offensive line coach, and Ole Miss still had to pay him every dime. Shout out Ross Bjork for that one. We get this message. If State fired Arnett after one season, what head coach would want to go to State knowing administration will fire you after one lackluster year? That is a fair question. It's fair, especially because Moorhead was 2-0, and Arnett could possibly be 1-0. It is absolutely a fair question. It is. That they will have to open the bank account. I mean, depending on who it is.
That's what it is right there. It's who would want to do it? Somebody who's making $1.5 million that wants to make $5 million. I mean, it's pretty simple mathematics there.
They will hire. I mean, you know, one of my State fan friends has repeatedly texted me about Lance Leopold. I'm here to tell you that's not happening. So you can't go 2 in Q, Mike Leach, 1 in Q, and hire a guy like Lance Leopold. So that kind of candidate's not going to be on your list, not realistically. But you can't afford to live in purgatory in this era. I mean, you never really could. I know it's 1 year, and I know what kind of message that sends. I understand if it does happen. But let's pretend for a second that Mississippi State loses to Kentucky this weekend. And they lose to Texas A&M. And they beat Southern Miss, and they lose the Egg Bowl, and they finish the season 5-7, which the odds makers will probably tell you that's not probably. They're telling you that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, that's how it's going to go. Yeah,
and you lose a great portion of your roster because of eligibility issues, and I assume fundraising for NIL is going to be quite difficult in that spot. Should you retain him? Now, you know, they don't have $0 in the collective, but when everybody else is raising money off of momentous good seasons or new coaches, you won't have that. The recruiting class is quite bad at the moment. Maybe that'll change, but at the moment it's not good enough. And, I mean, how many season ticket renewals are you going to have? How many people are going to buy into your program next year? And so if that's how this ends, and that's an if, they could beat Kentucky this weekend, we're having a totally different conversation. But if that is how this ends, in this era where everything happens so much faster and you can get buried so much faster, you can't afford not to. You cannot afford to live in purgatory with lacking fan interest and lacking money to acquire talent to help alleviate your current issues. Rebuilds don't take 3 years anymore. They take 1.5. Year one should be forgiven if in normal circumstances at most places. But Auburn fans are already impatient with Hugh Freeze. Already. Yeah. Because you can go get a quarterback tomorrow. Like, if they do make a change, priority one for new coach is quarterback, right? But what high-level transfer quarterback is going to be looking at Mississippi State this offseason? I hate to put it so frankly, but if nothing changes, if there's no material change, they're going to get the backup quarterback at Texas to come transfer to State. No.
Well, I think that guy's – yeah. Everything you're saying is correct, but, I think Selma knows all these things. Mm-hmm. So that's not a huge issue here. Obviously the season has to play out, and nobody's going to sit there and tell anybody, oh, yeah, we're going to make a change at 4-4 with 4 games left to play. That's not how this works. But it's foolish to assume otherwise, that Zach Selman this week isn't, putting a log on the fire and letting the smoke signals get out there. It's foolish to assume that. So from my perspective, State's going to play out these next 4 games. And then Friday after the Egg Bowl, obviously I think, we'll talk about the game, but we might have something else to talk about on that day if it goes the way that we're talking about it going. And if not that day, certainly by Monday, I would think, we will have something to talk about. Because the main thing you said is you can't afford to fall behind. You're about to be in a 16-team SEC. And the landscape of college football, it seems like it changes every 5 minutes. You don't want to ever be on the outside looking in. You don't want them to be looking at the SEC going, we can do without Mississippi State. You got to stay relevant. And if State can't do that, then they're going to be in huge trouble. So, yeah, I'm not too overly concerned that if things get away from Mississippi State here at the end of the season, which I think they will, then a decision will have to be made at the end of the season.
Terry says, come on, guys, give him a break. There are still several games to play this season, and you're trashing him like it's a foregone thing that he is fired. Haydad's probably going to be highly unliked by Arnett. Well, I don't mean to speak for Haydad, but that's not his job anyway.
I don't care. I don't care if Arnett likes me. All right, I like Arnett. We've had conversations off the record. He's a nice enough guy. That's not my job. My job is to come on this radio station and this network and tell you the truth about what I feel is going on at Mississippi State. All right? I don't care if this guy who I don't work for and who doesn't control anything that has to do with my employment likes me or not. Simple as that. So when I hear when I hear fans like, oh, the coach not going to like you, it's not like he and I are going out for beers every night anyway. Yeah, I'm not worried about it.
And without knowing him personally, I kind of feel like he would understand the criticism here. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. But, Terry, the thing is, this is what you get paid millions of dollars to deal with as a head coach. Kind of like the thing with Dabo. I mean, we're not trashing his character either. It's just the team has underperformed relative to expectations. They look like they're not competitive. Recruiting is not going well. Those things are undeniable. And that's, even though he's one of the lowest paid coaches, possibly the lowest paid coach in the SEC, it's $3 million a year. And if it's not going well, you're going to have to wear the criticism. And We would be doing a really, really boring show that wouldn't have any sponsors or listeners if our only take on this was, well, we'll see how the season plays out. Hey, let's preview Ole Miss Texas A&M. We'll see how it plays out. Who knows? What do we do with the other 2 hours and 59 minutes of the show every day?
Absolute coin flip, Just could win, they could lose.
We'll see. But this is what state fans are talking about. I've looked at all the message boards. I've talked to my state fan friends that I have, and John down the street. Nobody wants to talk about the Kentucky game. Not a single state fan that I've interacted with is like, hey, what do you think about the Kentucky game? You think they're going to make a move? We got to have the conversations that you guys are having. We will talk about Kentucky. We got a Kentucky beat writer coming on tomorrow. We will talk about the game itself for the rest of the week. But when this thing kind of comes out, we've got to talk about it. I mean, it's reality facing Mississippi State right now. And the idea that they would punt a football season to have money to pay a baseball coach's buyout is the goofiest thing I've ever heard. But anyway, 601-879-4395. We'll get to more of your texts when we 794-4395. Long story short, summarizing what we were just going over, I mean, I think it's abundantly clear that Zach Arnett is coaching for his job over the next 4 weeks. Can he get 2? If he gets 2 and goes back to a bowl game, is it that simple, hey, Dad? Or is it if he gets 2 and one of them is not Ole Miss, it's still?
I think 6-6 may not be enough because they've just played so poorly. And, I mean, the recruiting's not where you want it to be. They don't look competent on either side of the ball, especially on defense, which is where you thought with Zach Arnett and the amount of returning starters they had that they would be okay. That if this season had been a struggle because the offense wasn't working, you could probably pin that on a lot of things. But defense being bad doesn't work when you hire a defensive head coach.
Yeah.
So I don't know that 6-6 is a safe bet.
Yeah, you can't let the Kentucky game, just throwing that one out there, be the difference in salvaging a job or not. Well, beat Kentucky. Nope. That can't be part of your conversation either. And it's how it happens here. Looking like this and having your only SEC win to this point be a 7-3 win and then turning around and losing to Ole Miss at home, it's very hard for a coach to overcome.
Yeah.
And here's the crux of it. Back-to-back messages. Jeff in Grenada. My initiative renewal is November. I changed it to manual until I see if a change happens. We got another one. He texted again. I missed it. But it was... Shoot, hey, Dad, where did it go? I lost it. Anyway, here it is. Borky, you are right. If we bring back Arnett, I will not renew season tickets. That's Ryan and Madison. That's the kind of stuff that they have to consider here. That's what they have to think of.
Those people are out there, but there are also the same people who will. It doesn't matter if Mississippi State's playing football; they're going to buy tickets. But we've talked about this before. Mississippi State football right now, it's just not exciting, right? You're not attracting the casual fan. You're not attracting the bandwagon fan, the sidewalk alumni. And say what you want, those are the lifeblood of programs, right? Why is Alabama the biggest program in the SEC? Because they have the highest percentage of fans who didn't ever attend Alabama as a student. Those are the people who buy your T-shirts. Those are the people who fill your stadiums week in and week out. So State has to look at that. And when I think about their next, if they do move on from Arnett, I think they have to go proven head coach. They can't go coordinator. They have to get somebody who's run a program before. And you have to go offense. You can't go back to defense. You have to get an offensive guy in there who runs a more exciting style, to compete for viewers. I mean, I talk about this sometimes. People get mad, but it is an entertainment business, right? That's what this is about. You're supposed to be an entertaining product. And right now, nothing about Mississippi State football is entertaining. Watching those games, that's a hard watch. There's not a lot of people who are staying tuned for 4 quarters of Mississippi State football right now. I do, because I have to. Trust me, these past couple of weekends, if I could have gotten away with just watching the first couple of quarters and saying, I'll check the box score later. I would have. But so State's got a lot of things to figure out in these next couple months.